In the mid-8th century, there was a huge sprawling city at Björkö outside of Stockholm, and this city was called Birka. It was huge for the 8th century, that is. Up to 1,000 people lived in the city. That may not sound like much, but it was enormous in Scandinavia during the Viking Age. Birka was a city and a trading port, and it was the economic center of Sweden back then. For 200 years, it was an immensely important city in Scandinavia, and it was actually Sweden's first city. Today, you and me are gonna visit Birka, the Viking city. First of all, why do you want to go to Birka? As mentioned, Birka was Sweden's oldest city, and it was a significant trading port between 750 AD and the late 900s. It lies on the island of Björkö, Birch Island, and there's a Viking museum and 1,000-year-old remnants of the city to explore. You can also look at the famous Anskar cross, get a guided tour of the island, and explore a reconstructed Viking village. On this particular day, there's also a strongman competition called Starke Viking, Strong Viking, that takes place on the island. So there's plenty to do, and if that's still not enough, you can enjoy the beach or visit the restaurant Särimner. Särimner was the magical boar that was slaughtered and served up for the Aesir every evening in Valhalla. Then he was resurrected in the morning so that it could be eaten again the next evening. It sounds like a pretty miserable existence, to be honest. I hope he didn't keep his memories of that endless cycle of slaughter and rebirth. But I'll talk more about Särimner later. Let's talk about how to get to Birka if you wanna visit. Since Birka is located on an island, Björkö, you have to take a boat to get there, and there are a couple of different options. If you have a car, you can drive to Hovgården at Adelsö and take a short boat ride to Björkö from there. And if you have your own boat, you can dock at Kungshatt at Björkö, but I guess that pretty few people have that option. The most convenient option is to buy a combined boat tour and museum ticket for 525 Swedish kronor from Strömma. The boat ride takes approximately 2 hours, and you get a lot of interesting information along the way. The boat departs from Klara Mälarstrand, just opposite City Hall, so it's centrally located and quite convenient. There's also another boat that departs from Södertälje or Mariefred in the south, but yeah, either way, you are gonna need a boat to get to Birka. One of the islands that you pass on the way to Birka is Kungshatt. Kungshatt means King's Hat, and there's a pretty interesting story behind the name. According to legend, in the 800s AD, there was a king called Erik Väderhatt who was fleeing from his enemies and ended up on the island of Kungshatt. He rode his horse off a cliff and leapt into the water, and he survived because his horse was apparently a pretty good swimmer. But as he leapt off the cliff, he dropped his hat. And that hat was apparently a magical hat that could control the weather. So Erik was pretty miffed to lose that hat that was the source of his power and his name. Ever since the 1600s, there's been a hat on a pole on the highest place of that island to signify where King Erik Väderhatt lost his hat. It's a nice tale, but King Erik Väderhatt is a bit of a mystery because he doesn't really fit in with any known kings around that time. Some speculate that Erik could be Erik Edmundsson, who was at war with Harald Hårfager of Norway. Or possibly he could have been one of Ragnar Lothbrok's sons. Yep, the Ragnar from the TV series Vikings. Anyway, I'll talk more about Vikings soon, as in real Vikings and not a TV show. But now we're starting to get close to Birka. After disembarking, you have approximately 3.5 hours to spend at Birka if you take the boat tour with Strömma. It's not a huge amount of time, so you might want to plan your visit. If you want to take a guided tour of the Birka excavation site, it will take you 45 minutes to 1 hour. They have tours in both Swedish and English. Or maybe you want to spend some time at the beach. Maybe not a day like this because it's overcast and it's gonna rain. Or you might want to spend some time at a restaurant. Either way, you definitely want to check out the Viking Museum and the Viking Village to learn more about Birka and Vikings in general. Ever since 1993, Birka has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it's one of the best preserved examples of a Viking trading settlement. Sweden wasn't a unified country in the 8th century. Different tribes ruled different areas of the country, and the Svear tribe ruled this area. It's believed that the king of the Svear founded Birka around 750 AD as a way to control trade in northern Scandinavia. The king lived on Hovgården on the nearby island of Adelsö, and that's where he held audiences with visitors. I imagine that it was a bit of a power move to let people travel across the water to meet with him. Birka had a population of around 1,000, but people came from all over Europe to trade there. During excavations, people have found Arabian silver coins, pearls from Eastern Europe, fabric, glassware, and tons of other exotic trade goods. Merchants came to Birka to trade these goods for iron, hides, furs, and Viking handicraft of all kinds. Birka was basically a commercial metropolis around the 9th century. It's difficult to believe that Birka really was a big and important city back in the 9th century. And I guess that it wasn't really all that big compared to, for example, London, that had a population of 10,000, or Constantinople with more than 100,000 people. But then again, Constantinople was the biggest city in Europe, by far. Swedish Vikings traveled to Constantinople and served as merchants or guards, but they didn't call it Constantinople. They called it Miklagård, the big city. And it definitely must have been a big city compared to the streets of Birka. This is the Viking village, a reconstruction of some of the buildings at Birka, showing how people lived and worked in the city. Between 6 and 10 people lived in each of the houses at Birka, and most people made a living as artisans or merchants. The houses were mostly just a big room where people worked, slept, and kept all their belongings. The reconstruction of these houses started in 2006, and it's based on findings from excavations on the island. All houses were built out of wood, so nothing remains of the houses themselves, but there's still plenty of artifacts and remnants to investigate. They found tons of evidence for how people lived at the excavations at Birka, but there's still a lot more to discover. Just around 1% of the city has been excavated so far. If you want to know more about the excavations at Birka, you should definitely attend the guided tour. It takes around 1 hour, and you'll see hundreds of Viking graves, the foundations and outlines of the city, and lots of interesting tales from the Viking Age. And at the end of the tour, you can also have a look at Anskar's cross. Anskar was a missionary who came to Birka in the year 829 AD, hoping to convert tons of Viking pagans to Christianity. He didn't really succeed. He built a church and created a small congregation, but the congregation was dissolved quickly after Anskar left, and the church was burnt down. He returned in the year 850 to try to spread the word of Christianity again, and he built another church. But as soon as he left, the church was burnt down and it all died out once more. Anskar's cross was erected here in 1834, roughly 1,000 years after Anskar came to Birka to celebrate his attempts to convert the Swedish Vikings to Christianity, even if he didn't really succeed all that well. If there's one thing you know about Vikings, it's that they're fierce and strong warriors. At least according to the stereotype. In reality, most Vikings were farmers, and merchants, and artisans, and explorers. But it's fun to lean into the Viking myth sometimes, and some people who definitely do that is Starke Viking. Starke Viking means strong Viking, and it's a strong man and strong woman and strong child competition that takes place several times per year. They're at a medieval week on Gotland, for example, but today they're also at Birka. The competition started 11 years ago, and it's still going strong. Pun intended. It's a multi-day event, and today it's only the beginners, but they're still pretty damn impressive, even if I guess that the real powerhouses are coming later in the week. I forgot to sign up, otherwise I would have competed as well, and I would absolutely have done better than these guys. Trust me. The Viking Age started around the year 750 AD and it lasted until roughly 1050 AD. There's been a lot of discussions regarding what a Viking actually is, as in what the word means. Some use it to describe people from Scandinavia, but that's not really accurate. The people were simply Scandinavian, or Northmen. Others say that Viking was more of an occupation. It's what you did, not who you were. You could basically say that you're going to go Viking, which means to travel to a faraway place to trade a bit, and maybe burn and plunder a bit as well. The word can be traced back to the 600s AD, when it was used to describe pirates, so it wasn't exclusively connected to Scandinavian Vikings back then. But people aren't sure what the etymology of the word is. Some say that it has to do with the Swedish word vik, bay, but others say that it comes from the Latin vicus, merchant. Others connect it to the name of a place, Viken, and others think that it has to do with the way they row, or that they're traveling abroad, or many other interpretations. One thing that everyone agrees on, though, is that it's incorrect to call everyone from Scandinavia back then a Viking. But you could call them people from the Viking Age. That would be correct. Just don't start talking about obvious weird stuff like horned helmets and dreadlocks or stuff like that. Shield maidens is another contested topic. There's evidence of women being buried with weapons, and there's testimony that some participated in battle, but it's all pretty contested. It seems like everything about Vikings has a tendency to become pretty overblown and exaggerated, and shield maidens just might be one more of those exaggerated things. The museum at Birka isn't huge, but it's filled with items found on Birka itself. And you can also see models and reconstructions and lots of other items relating to the city and to archaeological finds. Personally, I think I like the models of the city best, where you get to see a glimpse of what life was like in Birka. And of course, you can buy souvenirs to get a piece of the Viking Age home with you. Sort of. Something pretty interesting about Swedish Vikings is that they traveled mostly eastward, as opposed to Danish and Norwegian Vikings who focused on the west and the south. Rurik was a Rus chief, and he founded the city of Novgorod around 850 AD. That became the foundation for the Kievan Rus, the first East Slavic state, and that state covered huge parts of what's now Eastern Europe. The funny thing about the Rus tribe is that they were an offspring of the Svear, and the name actually comes from Roslagen, an area of Sweden just north of Stockholm. So Swedish Vikings basically founded Russia more than 1,000 years ago. Well, not really. This was before the Viking Age, and it wasn't really Russia that they founded, but it's close enough. Swedish Vikings also traveled far to the east, all the way to the Black Sea and Miklagård. I mentioned Miklagård before, and that's the old Swedish name for Constantinople. Many Vikings traveled there to trade or to become part of the Varangian Guard. And you can still see Swedish graffiti on the Hagia Sophia, or well, not Swedish per se, but runes from Proto-Swedish Vikings back in those days. But unfortunately, they didn't have anything interesting to say. These ancient Vandals just carved things like Halfdan was here. I'm focusing on a lot of Viking-related activities, because that's what you focus on when you talk about Birka. But you could also travel here and just walk around and enjoy nature. Maybe take a swim if it's warm enough. It's not today, but other days it's very viable. Birka is a lovely place, and you don't have to be a Viking nerd to enjoy visiting the island. And if you want to have a bite to eat, you could visit the restaurant on the island, Särimner. Särimner serves a lot of rustic traditional food and some desserts as well. And beer, we mustn't forget about beer. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Särimner is the magical boar that Einherjarna, the Einherjar in Valhalla, slaughtered and ate every evening. Then they gathered up all the bones and the skin of the pig and wrapped it up neatly, and by morning the pig was resurrected, ready to be eaten again the next day. Interestingly enough, according to the Song of Grimner in the Poetic Edda, it's just the Einherjar who ate Särimner, not the Aesir, the gods. Odin is said to only drink wine, a man we all can aspire to, in other words, and it's not clear what the other Aesir and Vanir ate. If you're confused about all of these words, Aesir and Vanir and so on, it refers to the two different tribes of gods in Norse mythology. But I don't think that I have time to go into details about all of that in this video. So if you wanna know more about Norse gods, leave a comment and I'll see if I can make a video all about that. But for now, I need to get ready to travel all the way back to Stockholm. I hope that you enjoyed this video about how to visit Birka, Sweden's first city, and the Viking City. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day!